Hey everyone, I'm Jess. Welcome to my channel. Today I have 5 farmhouse projects that I am so excited to share with you. Alright everyone, let's get started. For the first project, I took a square piece of wall art that I found at the Dollar Tree, and I also found this little wooden circle at the Dollar Tree. And I'm going to start by giving this circle 2 coats of the plaster color by Waverly. Then for the square wall art, I didn't need the canvas, so I just used my utility knife and I ran it around the edges of the frame to remove the canvas, because all I needed for this project was the frame itself. As I was removing the canvas, some of the staples came out and some didn't, and I wasn't too worried about that. I didn't mind if some of the staples stayed in the back because I knew I was going to be adding a backing to this, so I didn't mind if there were a few staples left over. Next, I gave the frame 1 coat of the mineral color by Waverly, and I made sure that I got it all around the edges and on the inside too, but because I was going to distress this a little bit, I wasn't too worried if I didn't have a completely opaque coverage on the frame. And then using that plaster color again, I just did a little bit of dry brushing around the edges just to give it a little bit more character and a little bit more distressing. Now, since this frame didn't have glass in it, I'm using one of these chopping mats that you can find at the Dollar Tree, and I just traced around my frame and I used my paper trimmer to cut these. These cut pretty easy, but I always like to use a paper trimmer because I think that it's just a little bit easier to get a straighter line. So I traced around the frame and I cut it out with my paper trimmer, and I found this really cool frosted window film at the Dollar Tree, which is basically like contact paper, but it has a little bit of a pattern on it. So I cut a piece out to fit the chopping mat and I placed it over it, and I really like how it looked. I was really surprised by this. I had never used anything like this before, but I thought the pattern on it was so pretty. It's just a real simple floral, and because it's frosted, it's very subtle, which I really like. So once I had the chopping mat covered with the window film, I just used a little bit of hot glue to attach the chopping mat back onto the back of the frame. Once I had the cover back on the back of the frame, I knew I wanted to decorate the center of this circle somehow, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to put a saying on it, but in the end I decided to create just a small flower bouquet using these greenery picks that I found at the Dollar Tree. I really like these greenery picks because they kind of have that frosty look to them. So I just added 3 little picks together and I tied the bottom of them together with some jute, and then I just created a simple bow using this black and white gingham ribbon, and I attached that to the bottom of the bouquet, but I left the tails a little bit longer because I wanted to attach it to the circle first before I cut the tails. So once I had that together, I glued it onto the circle, and then I was able to judge where I needed to cut the tails at. And then I just used a little more hot glue to glue onto the back of the circle and attach that to the center of the frame. I love how easily this project came together, and I like that it needed just a few simple items that you can find at the Dollar Tree. And if you can't find that window film, you could leave the chopping mat the way it is, or if you've used a picture frame, you could just use the glass that is part of the picture frame. I am really excited because this video is part of a Friend Friday hop put together by Heidi Sonboul from Heidi Sonboul DIY. She has been one of my favorite creators on YouTube, and I'm so honored to be a part of one of her hops. Heidi has put together an awesome group of crafters, and we are all doing farmhouse themed projects. So once you're done with this video, go down to my description box and click on the first link, and it will take you to the next person in the hop. I will also have the link pinned in the comment section. For the next DIY, I'm going to use one of these really cool decorative jars from the Dollar Tree and a smaller glass bowl. The bowl isn't really a bowl shaped. I think it's actually supposed to be a vase. It kind of has a tapered bottom to it. And all I'm doing is taking the lid from the decorative jar, and I'm using some E6000 and some hot glue to attach the bowl to the top of the lid. Now for the decorative part of the jar, I'm going to use the plaster color by Waverly, and I gave the jar 2 coats. I wanted a pretty good coverage on this, but if there were a few spots that didn't quite get covered, I wasn't too worried about it because I am going to distress it just a little bit later on. So after the jar and the lid had a little bit of time to set up with those two adhesives, I took a little bit of hot glue and I started at the bottom of the lid, and I'm using this jute that I found at Walmart. Now they do sell jute at the Dollar Tree also, but the one that you can find at Walmart is just a little bit thicker. So when I'm wrapping projects with jute, I like to use this thicker one just because it goes a little bit quicker. So once I had got the first round at the bottom of the lid, I just started working my way up, and because the base of the jar is the same size as the top of the lid, it was a pretty smooth transition to get the jute from the lid to the jar. So you could stop at the top of the lid, but I wanted to kind of give this just a little bit more character. So I decided to wrap the jute partway up on the jar as well. I didn't want to go up the whole way because I wanted you to be able to see what was going to be inside of it. So I think I would say that I covered it about a third of the way up. That's just kind of where I thought it looked good. That's like the natural stopping point that I picked. So once I had all of the jute in place, I always like to use a lighter just to burn off the little fuzzy pieces, but that's not necessary. That's just something that I prefer. So now that my jar is dry, I took my sanding block, and I obviously need to get a new one because chunks of the sanding block were flying everywhere, but I was able to get this distressed, and because it had a pattern on it, it really brought out that pattern. Then I was able to attach the lid back onto the jar, and using some of these river rocks, I just filled the top of the jar up with the river rocks, and I added a little succulent, and that was the end of the project. This came together so quick and easy, and I love how this kind of walks that line between farmhouse and boho. And I really like the pattern on this jar, and I actually had tried to put a pack of fairy lights inside of it, but you could see the brush strokes too much. So I think if you used spray paint on the decorative part, it would actually look really cute to have some fairy lights in there too. For the next project, I'm going to be using 2 of these canvas framed art pieces from the Dollar Tree also. And I really liked the shape of these. I liked how long and kind of narrow they were. And I only needed 2 for this project. So I took the canvas off, and again, I wasn't too worried about getting the staples out of the back because the top side was nice and finished. Then I took a pack of these 6-inch dowel rods from the Dollar Tree, and I glued a dowel into each corner of one of the frames. And once I had all 4 dowel rods in place, then I was able to add hot glue to the second frame and glue it onto the other end of the dowel rod. So that way it kind of gave me a rectangular box shape. And once I had the dowel rods in place on both of the frames, I took more hot glue and just reinforced it over the top of the dowel rods just to make it nice and sturdy. To decorate around the outside of the box, I'm using these giant craft sticks that I found at Walmart, and they're significantly bigger than the tongue depressor size. So I took 24 of the sticks and I cut them at various lengths that measured between 6.5 inches and 7 inches. So some were 6.5, some were 7, some were 6 3/4. I just kind of did it at random. But I found that I needed 24 to be able to fit around the outside of the box. And if you've watched my videos before, you know that I love to cut craft sticks with a paper trimmer. I just think it makes it so much easier. So for my craft sticks, I decided to paint them in this English Navy by Apple Barrel and the Truffle and the Mineral Colors by Waverly. Now you could obviously just paint these all one color, but I wanted to do 3 different colors that I knew would match the furniture that I like to put out on my front porch in the summer. So once I had all 24 sticks painted in those 3 colors, then I took the plaster color by Waverly and I just did some dry brushing all over the sticks. That way, even though the sticks were 3 different colors, by using the plaster color, it kind of tied them all together. And again, since I cut all of the sticks at various lengths between 6.5 and 7 inches, it kind of gave it a really neat rustic feel because the sticks didn't really line up at the top. So it just kind of variegated it a little bit and it made it feel a little bit more rustic and farmhouse. So you can see here, once I got all of my sticks dry, I started to attach them on the outside, and I decided to do them in the same pattern. So I went the truffle color, the mineral color, and then the navy color. And I found the best way to do this was to glue 3 sticks down on one side and then glue 3 sticks on the opposite side. And then that way I was able to space out the center sticks a little bit more, because you do need to leave just a tiny little gap in between each stick. Now, I was able to get the sticks on pretty evenly, but the two smaller ends, the one side I got 3 sticks on with no problem, but the other side I did have to trim one of the sticks down a little bit lengthwise because it was just a little bit too wide. But that was pretty easy to do with my scissors because the wood grain runs lengthwise, so it's pretty easy to cut them down whenever you need them to be just a little bit narrower. Once all my sticks were glued in place, I took one of these garden decorations from the Dollar Tree, and I really love the watering can that's on there. I just think it's so funny that it says "Staying Alive," because I'm going to put fake plants in this. So I decided to decorate up the box just a little bit, and I'm using this burlap ribbon that I got at Michael's, and I'm just creating a band with it around the center of the box. And because burlap ribbon, like, the glue tends to seep through a bit, so I tried not to add too much hot glue when I'm wrapping it around something, because you can really see the glue as it comes through. So once I had the ribbon around the center of the box, I took that little watering can and I just created a little bow just to decorate it up a little bit. But I also knew that I needed it to raise up off of the box slightly, so using some of the leftover scraps from the jumbo craft sticks, I just hot glued 3 together just to act as risers, and I hot glued those to the back of the can, and then I was able to attach the watering can to the front of the box. I decided to take this box one step farther, and I created handles using this nautical rope found at the Dollar Tree. So I tied a knot in one end, and then I measured it on the box how long I wanted it, and I just tied another knot, and then I cut the rope as close as I could to the knot. And then when I hot glued it onto the side of the box, the hot glue not only attached it to the box, but it also helped the knot from coming apart. And then I just repeated that on the other side. To close off the bottom of the box, I just traced it onto a piece of scrap chipboard, and then I was able to just hot glue it onto the bottom of the box. And by the way, if you're interested in anything that I use in my videos, like my hot glue gun or my paper trimmer, I always have those linked in my description box below. Here's a look at the final project. If you're coming to my channel from the hop, I want to welcome you, and please say hi in the comments because I love talking to everybody in the comment section. And if you like what you see, make sure you hit the subscribe button and ring the bell and give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate it. And if you're on social media, I am on Instagram at GlueLala, so make sure you follow me over there as well. I wanted to create a decorative tray, so I found these really pretty frames at the Dollar Tree, and I'm showing you 3 here, but I only needed 2. So out of the 2 frames, the one I took the backing out of it, and I took all of the prongs out of the frame as well. But the other one I left intact because I needed to be able to reattach the back to that frame. Using one of these Simply Blessed calendars from the Dollar Tree, I found an image that I really liked, so I took that image out and then I laid the backing from the frame on top of it, and I just kind of eyeballed it in the center, and I used my little Mickey pin there to trace it out, and then I cut the image down. And anytime that I use any kind of paper, I like to use the Art Glitter Glue by Ranger to glue it down. But because these calendar pages are so thin, it's so hard to find an adhesive that won't wrinkle this particular paper. So if you have a suggestion for some type of glue, let me know in the comments what you like to use for these calendar pages, because I've tried a glue stick, I've tried Mod Podge, and it just always seems to wrinkle. So once I had the image on the back of the frame, I just reattached it, and then I took the top frame that I had taken all of the prongs out, and I just used a little bit of hot glue here, and I glued it onto the top. And this is the base of the tray, which I think it looks really pretty like it is. It's kind of like a shadow box effect. What's nice about these 2 pieces of decoration from the Dollar Tree is that they didn't have glass in them, so I didn't have just extra pieces of glass laying around. To decorate up the tray just a little bit more, I used some of the plaster color by Waverly and did just a little bit of dry brushing on it. And then I'm going to use this leather ribbon from the Dollar Tree to create the handles. So I laid my ruler down and I measured in 2 inches from each end of the frame. And the piece of ribbon that I cut was about 5 inches. So that way when I glued them down, it just popped it up a little bit to make it look like a handle. Now I have this trim on hand that I found on clearance at Hobby Lobby. But you could use buttons, or you could use thumbtacks that you cut the tack part off of, or even just little flowers would look really cute attached to each end of the handle. And then I repeated that on the other side as well. I love how easily this tray came together, and this is another one of those pieces that I think kind of crosses the line between farmhouse or even farmhouse glam, because I could see lining the inside of the tray with some pearls or some gemstones and glamming it up just a little bit more. For the last project, I wanted to create a monogram tag. So I had this tag on hand from Christmas time, but they seem to always have these out at the Dollar Tree for most holidays and most seasons. And of course, the little stickers they put on the back are never easy to come off. So I had to use my heat gun and my scraper, but it finally came off. So I gave the tag 2 coats of the plaster color by Waverly. And I've really been loving stripes lately, so I wanted to create some stripes on this tag. So I used my painter's tape, and whenever I do stripes, I always like to start in the center of the project because I think it just makes it look a little bit nicer if the center stripe, no matter what the color is in the center. I've done projects before where the center stripe has been off a little bit, and it just kind of made the whole project look crooked. So using my painter's tape as a guide, I laid down a piece of painter's tape, then another piece as a spacer, and then I repeated that process the whole way across. So to create the stripes, instead of just doing a solid color, I decided to dry brush on the mineral color by Waverly because I wanted it to have a really subtle effect on the tag. And you can see here when I pull the tape off, you can definitely see the stripes, but they're not a solid color. So I wanted to create a smaller stripe in between the larger stripes. So I'm using this thinner washi tape, and I laid a piece down the center of the white part of the stripe, and then I was able to use the same washi tape on either side, and then whenever I removed the center, that gave me a thinner strip in between each of the other stripes. And I kind of went back and forth as to whether I should paint the thinner stripes a different color, but in the end I decided to just paint them the same mineral color, and I did the same dry brushing technique on these little stripes as well. And you'll be able to see here once I pull the tape off of these smaller stripes, you definitely get a clean edge, but it just really gives it that distress look without actually having to distress it. To create the monogram for my tag, I used my Cricut and I used some navy cardstock, and I'm gluing 2 pieces of cardstock together because the cardstock I had was a little bit thinner and I wanted this to be just a little bit more sturdy. And then I used my ruler just to give me a guideline on the bottom of the tag, but I wanted to leave a little bit of space at the bottom. So I ran a piece of washi tape there just as my guide. And like I said before, anytime I do paper crafts, I like to use that art glitter glue by Ranger because for the most part, other than those calendar pages, it doesn't wrinkle paper and it dries really quickly. And if you're interested, the font that I used on my monogram was called High Jump. It's in the Cricut design space. So to decorate up the tag a little bit more, I just took some jute and I just gave it a couple wraps around the bottom. And you can see here, I did end up covering the back of the tag with a little bit of craft paper because I didn't want that Christmas scene with all that glitter to show. And then I just created a simple bow using this burlap ribbon from Michaels, and I think this ribbon is about 1.25 inches wide, And I just kind of looped it around itself and then tied it in the center with some jute. Now, like I said, I used my Cricut to cut out the monogram for in the center of my tag, but if you don't have a Cricut or another type of cutting machine, you could always look online for a free printable for a monogram for your own name, and you could either trace it on, or you could even try hand painting. I'm just not very good at hand painting, so I always rely on my Cricut for these type of things. And I love how this tag came together, and I think this is another project that could kind of go between farmhouse or even a little bit coastal too. Here's a final look at all of the projects from today's video. I think my favorite is probably the first one. I really like that square frame with the bouquet in the center. I really liked using that frosted window film, and I'm excited to use that in some future DIYs. Make sure you head down to the description box once you're done with this video and click on that first link so that you can hop to the next person in the Friend Friday hop. And thanks again to Heidi Sonboul for inviting me to join in on this Friend Friday hop. I really had a lot of fun, and I met a lot of great creators along the way. If you like this video, make sure you hit thumbs up, make sure you hit subscribe, ring the bell, do all the things. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye!